He was born in Encino, and we tried really hard to find an Encino Little League photo of him, but we didn't have enough time. It is my great privilege and honor to introduce Los Angeles' mayor, Mr. Eric Garcetti. I don't think you need a lot more introduction than that. We seem to know you pretty well and give you as much time as possible.
Thank you. I want to say I officially got one bite, so I'm well fed now. It is great to be back here, and thank you so much for inviting me. I promised you when I was here last during the campaign I would love to come back, and as I said then, coming to Encino is always coming home. Most of you already know this, but I grew up walking distance from here on Woodley Avenue for 17 years of my life. I watched Ventura Boulevard change. At the corner of Woodley and Ventura, I always said it was a metaphor for what was going on in each decade. In the 70s, it was a motel, if you remember. In the 80s, it was a savings and loan. And then in the 90s, the shopping center exploded there. And Encino is really where I come from. It's near and dear to my heart. It is the center of the city for me in so many different ways. And I really appreciate what the Chamber has done and what the community has done to be a model of what Los Angeles is all about. I have been your mayor now for a little bit over 7 months, 42nd mayor of the city of Los Angeles. Something I never would have imagined growing up here. Playing Encino Little League, going to Tapia Brothers, walking here, taking my bike down this area. It felt like the center of the universe, but it also felt like anonymous USA. It was a place you could see when you turned on the television because you could see a home that came straight from the San Fernando Valley on the Brady Bunch, but it also felt like you lived in the midst of a great, great city. And we still do. And in some ways, that's the spirit that fuels me as your mayor. I wanted to bring back the best of what it felt like when I was growing up here and put that into what has become a modern city and the needs in a global economy and making sure that we have a safe, a prosperous, and a livable city, but one that's also the best run city in America. Those are the 4 goals that I put forward: to make sure you're safe here, to make sure that we have a prosperous and growing economy, that this is a livable place of great neighborhoods, but that you can expect that City Hall actually runs better than it has been. And I'm going to focus mostly on the area of a prosperous city because as a chamber, I want and need your involvement in what we're going to do to jumpstart our economy. When I started as your mayor, I said I was going to do 2 things. One is I was going to make City Hall work for you again, be open, accessible, accountable, modernized, technological, but also we were going to do whatever we could to help jumpstart the economy, not just to ride the wave of the recovery from the recession, but to lead it, to push it, to be an example of a place that had opportunities for everybody again, just like it did when I grew up here. But let me say a couple things about the other ones first. We know the foundation of prosperity comes from being safe in the city, and I want to thank our police department and all our supporters of the police department for what was another record-breaking year last year. We drove crime down again, even in the midst of the tail end of a recession, so that we are now officially the safest big city in America in terms of per capita violent crime. We're even safer than New York City. That said, every burglary, every Part 1 crime, every homicide is one too many. And we're going to continue to do that work. Captain Egan and those great folks that are out there doing that here in San Fernando Valley, we're going to keep the strength of this department. We're going to continue to invest in youth to prevent and to intervene, to prevent crimes and to intervene in their lives, to help us do things like summer night lights and some of our gang reduction work. And also public safety, making the safest city isn't just about policing. It's also about a fire department that is more responsive, a fire department that brings down its response times by new leadership that were brought in with Acting Chief Jim Featherstone, so that when you call 911, an ambulance or a fire truck rolls out when it should. And it's also about preparedness for emergencies. And I'm very proud, especially here in the San Fernando Valley. I was born about 2 weeks before the Silmar earthquake in 1971. My mom used to joke that that was my announcement that I had arrived. But the 1994 earthquake and the devastation that it wreaked here, when people say, are we prepared for an earthquake? I say we're as well prepared as any big city in America, which is to say we're totally unprepared. And so for the first time, Dr. Lucy Jones, who you've seen on TV all the time, Earthquake Lucy, she's a seismologist with the United States Geological Survey, has been loaned by the federal government to work with me at City Hall as kind of our earthquake czar to strengthen our buildings that are in danger of collapsing during earthquakes, and to make sure that our water and communications infrastructure, when an earthquake comes, are strengthened too. So she has a year to get us a plan to do that, to work with our property owners to figure out how to strengthen those buildings, and to make sure that we have that water infrastructure so when fires break out after an earthquake, we can prevent loss of property and life. So that's the public safety, the safest city piece. The livable city is a whole bunch of things. It's things like traffic and a public transportation system and trying to get smarter about what we do, not just doing things like widening the 405 freeway, which, as I've said before, is kind of like finding a slightly bigger sponge to throw in the ocean. And we're going to wonder why it's waterlogged the moment that we do. We need a north-south valley line here. We need to think about intelligently getting through the Sepulveda Pass with a tunnel or some other way that will get people from Sherman Oaks to UCLA in 10 minutes. We need to make sure that we have walkable neighborhoods that support our businesses. And so the first executive directive that I launched, and this does link into economic prosperity too, is the Great Streets Initiative. That will pick streets throughout my administration, 3 or 4 at a time, and we had over 190, I think, that were submitted for the first round, that will become kind of the backbone of neighborhood revitalization. As much as you want it, as much as I want it, the 20-minute drive throughout the city is probably long gone. 20 minutes, if we're lucky, will get us from one neighborhood to the next some days. So what we need is to make sure that we have great neighborhoods that are much more self-contained, and the benefit for you is places that we can walk in our own neighborhood to get a good bite to eat, to find those neighborhood services that we need, that we won't drive as far. We'll do that still to see friends, but that we have neighborhoods that really are what a neighborhood should be, a great village contained. You know, when I used to walk to I Enjoy Bagels or over the Baskin Robbins on Havenhurst, Balboa, excuse me, we used to be able to have that experience of being a family together and seeing the neighborhood and feeling that. And the Great Streets initiatives to combine all the monies that we have in different parts of the city and to beautify our main streets, to make them safer to walk and to bike in, to make sure the traffic flows more smoothly in them, to bring art and culture to them, to have promotions of local businesses and shopping locally. And so livability in this town is going to be about making sure that we have better transit options, more beautiful streets, and that also we can sustain ourselves. I just came from a meeting at our Bureau of Sanitation. I convened last week the Presidential Climate Change Task Force here in Los Angeles with Governor Brown, and we talked a lot about the drought and what we can do to get through that. So we need to make sure we conserve our resources, and we produce a lot of jobs, by the way, when we do look at sustainability. Already LA is becoming a green jobs capital, and I have a plan to push forward thousands of new jobs through water quality, conservation, and solar energy in the city. The best run city, which is the fourth, and then I'll return to my business stuff, is something that you should expect. You know, it's probably such a low bar these days for government that if you just improve things a little bit, people say you're doing a great job, but I'm much more ambitious than that. You may have read about, I was the first mayor to re-interview every single one of our general managers. The mayor had the power to do so, but never had done before, because we can hire and fire general managers. So I went through all 37 chiefs, executive directors, general managers from the port, the airport, Department of Water and Power, cultural affairs, our housing department, etc., and asked them what their plans were and how they fit into my 4 goals of becoming more customer friendly. Ever notice sometimes we're not as friendly as we should be in the city? 2, to innovate, just as you have to do in business, to use technology and innovation to deliver services better. 3, to be more sustainable in terms of an impact on the environment. And 4th, to help jumpstart our economy. And that's regardless of what general manager it was. You might ask, what does a fire chief have to do with sustainability? Well, he has a whole fleet of vehicles. And what kind of fuel do we burn? What kind of chemicals do we use on fire? What does a police chief have to do with the economy? Well, we know that some of the things we've been able to do in neighborhoods like Hollywood, if we hadn't reduced crime in half, we wouldn't have seen the prosperity that followed, that invited businesses and investment in. So each one of these general managers needs to think beyond his or her own narrow focus to really what is their responsibility citywide. And we've opened up the halls of City Hall. I work out of the San Fernando Valley all the time. You might not read about it, hear about it. I was in Van Nuys 2 weeks ago in Van Nuys City Hall. I spent a whole day in Pacoima. We're taking walks and doing office hours, and I invite you if you ever want to sit down face to face with me. We do those every month. We've done a couple walks already, and I'd love to do it in Encino if you wanted to. Sometime where we actually get dozens of volunteers. The first one we did was in Venice with over 200 Angelinos who volunteered to go door to door, Let me tell you what it feels like when you suddenly knock on one apartment and it's a tattooed bassist who's going to be the next big rock star next to the Lithuanian grandmother, next to the African-American woman who runs the Baptist Food Bank across the street, next to, you know, somebody who is a dot-com entrepreneur, all on the same block. You really get a sense of how dynamic, diverse, and empowering this city is. Which links me to the main thing I want to talk to you about, which is everything I want to do to have a better run City Hall, to have a safe city, to have a livable city, really then comes down to what resources do we have. And the resources we have comes from how well businesses are doing, which is why I focus so much on what we can do at City Hall. I don't create a lot of direct jobs, but if I can help, just as I did as a council member in neighborhoods like Hollywood, Silver Lake, and Echo Park, and Atwater Village when I was responsible for those areas, to jumpstart the economy, to help local businesses get established, to help entrepreneurs get started up, to help small businesses become medium and medium become large, then everything else I want to do is made that much easier. I'll have tax revenues that come in so that I can pave the streets. I'll make sure that the resources are there to be able to continue that cycle and help the next business come around. So how am I going to do this? Well, I'm going to do it in 4 ways. 1, we're going to build things. 2, we're going to train people. 3, we're going to make it easier to be a business here. And 4, we're going to promote Los Angeles. First, let me start with building. That's the most direct impact I can have. And certainly the livability of a city, whether businesses decide to stay here, rests on how well our infrastructure is built out. It's time for us to pave our city streets comprehensively. That won't be done overnight because 70 years of neglect and enough streets to stretch at a 4-line highway from Los Angeles to Paris, if you want to visualize what my responsibility of paving is. We started early on though with Operation Neighborhood Blitz, getting out there, working with chambers and neighborhood councils. We've gone to all 99 neighborhoods already, and we're starting a second one to get out there and do our potholes proactively. And now we're looking at a more comprehensive way to pave our city streets. It costs each one of us $842 a year in car repairs because of the damage we sustain on our city streets. I think that's a tax I can lower if we figure out a way to actually rebuild our failing streets. We can also invest in building in terms of our airport and our port. And if you haven't flown internationally recently, go to Tom Bradley International Terminal, the new one. And as bad as LAX has been for so many years crumbling, I was talking to the head of Hudson News, who, you know, takes all of our money for newspapers and magazines. He's a friend. He said he's in 80 terminals in North America. And he said, no BS, this is now the best terminal in North America. And we've already started 6 other terminals at LAX, comprehensively redoing them so that, you know, some years from now we can look at LAX as a cutting-edge airport that has rail that goes into it. Many of you have seen I've revived bringing rail into LAX through a rail-based people mover that would take you to every single terminal every couple minutes as something that the city needs and deserves. We're at the port, widening the port there. We've just finished dredging the port so that we can bring in the big container ships. And 43% of the goods that come into the United States come through our twin ports of LA and Long Beach. And that's so important for trade all around this city and all around the region. So the main places that we'll build are going to be in those areas. That will provide jobs and will also help others build. This weekend was a $2 billion weekend. We had a groundbreaking just next to the freeway in a project downtown called Metropolis, which is funded by a Chinese company, which is great. I've been very aggressive in foreign direct investment from Latin America, from Korea, from China, because there's a $500 billion of Chinese dollars waiting to come back to someplace. And if LA isn't aggressive about them, they'll go to another city. But we did that, and then the Korean Air project where the Wilshire Grand was, you might have seen on the news, had the largest, we established a Guinness Book of World Record of the largest continuous concrete pour in human history. It was 2,000 plus truckloads that went on for about 36 hours in what will be the tallest building west of Mississippi, creating 11,000 jobs alone. $2 billion just one weekend. And that's not going to be just downtown. We have to do it at scale in different places, so we don't overwhelm any neighborhoods, but we have to get back to allowing us to have, again, jobs created by the private sector building, and that's the first focus. Second is training. I want to share an interesting, sobering statistic with you, or set of statistics. In Los Angeles, the rate of high-wage jobs is actually increasing, and the rate of low-wage jobs is actually decreasing relative. But our poverty rate, 5 years after the recession, is higher than it was before. So how do we figure that out? Higher wage jobs are increasing more rapidly. How do we have a higher poverty rate? Well, it's because we don't have as much of a problem with jobs as we do with skills. People who live in Los Angeles aren't getting those jobs. Too often employers can't find people who are growing up here, being trained here, graduating from community colleges, trade schools, or colleges and coming back here to fill those jobs. Take one example, Silicon Beach, which isn't, by the way, just in Santa Monica and Venice, it's here in the Valley, it's in downtown, it's in regional places like Culver City and Burbank and Glendale. Digital technology companies were establishing one every 40 hours here in Los Angeles. Last year, $1 billion in investment in digital technology companies. If you graduate from high school knowing how to computer program, coding, you get a job at $70,000 without a college degree the moment you graduate. But as I talk to CEOs who are part of Silicon Beach, they say we don't have enough programmers graduating from Los Angeles. So for the first time in 20 years, I put out to bid our city's, it's 15 years I think, our city's workforce training dollars, which have been given to a lot of people who have provided jobs for folks, but too often have just helped people fix their resumes or read through the want ads. And they're not actually matching them with employers and training to give them a career. We need to change that. We need to train people in those industries that are growing, like healthcare. HealthNet, which is based out here, Fortune 500 company in Woodland Hills, will increase because of the Affordable Care Act the number of people they cover from 800,000 to 1.3 million in a little bit over a year and a half. That means tremendous job growth there. That means in our hospitals job growth. But we need to make sure people here in LA get those jobs. So we're going to train people by sector, in the entertainment industry, in the health industry, in construction, in banking, in security, with a focus on our veterans, which I'm establishing an Office of Veterans Affairs for the first time in the city since World War II, because we have so many veterans coming back who need to find those jobs. And in a couple other sectors, in hospitality sector as well, to get people into those jobs, trained, and to move the economy forward. When there are employees ready to work, we're ready to prosper. And the last example on that I'll use is right here. You know, during the campaign, I helped save the North Valley Occupational Center's program at Van Nuys Airport, which was going to be cut because of an LAUSD cut, even though there are 30,000 airplane mechanics that are going to be hired in the next decade. And these are jobs that start at about $29, $30 a year. Within 2 or 3 years, you can earn $100,000. And again, without a college degree. But because of $200,000 cut from LAUSD, it was going to be gone. Well, we own the airport, the city. We charge them about the same in rent. So I figured out a way for us to say no rent. That saved them the amount of money and kept those jobs. But we have to be smart about where we invest and how we train. Third is I want LA to have a reputation that we're open for business again, that it's easy to be a business here. I want to see a reduction and eventual elimination of our city's gross receipts tax, which, as you know, taxes you even when you lose money. It makes us 88 out of 80. All you know, if you have the ability to incorporate someplace just over city borders, or to find a, your next expansion is going to be over in Westlake Village instead of in Northridge, people are leaving this city in order to take those businesses elsewhere. It's just a stupid tax. And I'm going to need your help, because there's skeptics at City Hall, there's people who are fiscal conservatives who think that it's more conservative to protect that money, who wonder how we're going to fill that hole. I always counter, the entire pie is shrinking. We have less and less money. That hole is created because businesses leave. And I didn't come to this out of any ideology. When I was council member in Hollywood, we could waive the gross receipts tax for new entertainment companies. I tracked the TV guy to headquarter there, Nielsen to have one of their regional headquarters there. These are hundreds of jobs that were averaging $70,000, $80,000 per job, and they spent so much more on their taxes in that area, raising the property values by 475%. We made much, much more money than we ever would have off the gross receipts tax, which, by the way, we never would have gotten because they never would have come. But we also have to cut red tape to make it easier for you to do things in the city. So whether that's consolidating the operations that are done between some of planning department and building safety, whether it's giving you an idea of how long it should take to get a business up and running, we're focused on doing that to make it easier to be a business. Plus, we've convened a number of councils in strategic industries. Out here in the Valley, a very important, we have an aerospace council that we're looking at to revive aerospace, which is still one of our top 5 industries. You would think by the rhetoric that it left after the Cold War. It certainly was cut, but we have, I'll give you an example, in North Hollywood during the campaign, I met with somebody who was a CEO of an aerospace company here in the Valley. He said, this is the first time I've ever had a city official ever meet with me. I can get a meeting in the San Fernando Valley with the governor of Texas easier than I can get an LA city official to pay attention to me. And then he said, by the way, after the disaster in Japan, the nuclear disaster, and a lot of the companies that did aerospace, airplane parts were out of business for a short time, he said, I got a lot of customers from Japan. And I figured it'd be temporary, and once they're back up and running, they'd go back to Japan. He said, guess what? 100% of those contracts I kept because we do it better and cheaper than the Japanese companies. And we never would have had the shot, but all of our clients there in Japan now want to do business here out of the San Fernando Valley. So whether it's existing industries like aerospace or filming, and you know the focus that I put on filming by appointing for the first time a film czar in the city of Los Angeles, Tom Sherrick, who was an amazing friend, an incredible individual who passed away, a dear, dear friend, really moved the ball forward. And we just recently appointed Ken Zifrin, who is probably the finest entertainment lawyer in town, a former lawyer to Jerry Brown, which is strategically nice to expand our filming tax credit so we can bring more filming back. So whether it's old industries like that, whether it's new industries like digital information or services, or in other industries that we just never talk about that have been under our nose for a long time, like financial services. This is a great financial services city. You think about, we have $3 trillion that we manage in terms of the assets here, from the Capital Group, which is the largest in the world downtown, to smaller players and hedge funds and venture capital. Sometimes we fixate too much on Fortune 500 companies and things like that, and we forget the number of companies that are owned and controlled by LA financial institutions. We need to attract more capital to come here. Or healthcare, like I told you with HealthNet. We don't talk about LA as a healthcare town, but between Kaiser and HealthNet, this is probably the greatest center of healthcare companies. And we need to move that into biotech and do things like campuses for folks to be able to take ideas from our great universities like CSUN and Caltech and USC and UCLA and to put them into new startups. So again, we'll build things, we'll train things, and we'll make it easier to do business here by focusing on our taxes, regulation, and key industries. But then lastly, I'm going to sell this town. I don't think we're going to sell it off. I'm going to sell this town's greatness to ourselves, to our region and state, and to this world. Now, I think LA sometimes gets a little lazy because we have such great weather and such great people and such great geographical position and topography that we don't hustle like many other places do around the world. I was telling somebody, I'm not a mayor of a town that's 10 below zero right now, that's landlocked, that doesn't have a diverse population, that has no port or airport to speak of. But you know what? In those places, they work harder than we do. We have to put together the amazing assets. I'm mayor of Los Angeles, a place where it's a perfect day almost every day, where you can ski and surf. I don't know if you can ski this year, but most years you can ski and surf on the same day, where even if the city didn't exist and you put a point on the most dynamic intersection of the global economy, it would be where the Pacific Rim meets Latin America meets America right here. You'd have to build a city even if we didn't exist. Where we have the largest port in America, the #1 airport in the world in terms of flights that begin and end there, the largest municipal utility, badly in need of reform, but that we're going to put back on track, and I'm not going to let up on that. Those things together, we should be able to market Los Angeles much better than we do. I joked with Mayor Villaraigosa that it seemed like the slogan when he landed at the airport every couple weeks seemed to change. Does anybody even remember what the latest slogan was? I think the last one before I took over was, Los Angeles, whatever you like, it's better here. It sounds like Las Vegas or something, but it's nothing that speaks about Los Angeles. And we're not sure what it will be, but either that Los Angeles is where creativity lives, or the idea that Los Angeles is everybody's second home. If you're not lucky enough to be from here, there's something that's familiar right away, no matter where you come from on the face of this earth. Or you can be from here and go 10 minutes in a new direction and find something you've never seen before. We have to market this town. And I want to make sure that people understand that they can't afford not to do business here in Los Angeles, and that we will be there with them. I pick up the phone and talk to small store owners and big CEOs every week. I'm managing the city to try to make sure that our employees know that that culture has to permeate every interaction that we have, that you are the ambassador of the city. It's not just the mayor, it's that person who's the LAX traffic cop. It's that person who's out there making sure at the building safety counter what sort of interaction you have. It's the person in a library. It's the person on a trash truck. And if we can together say that LA's best days are ahead of us, the prosperity will follow. Remember that feeling, if you were here, I know some of you probably weren't, but most of us were in 1984, when the Olympics were in Los Angeles. That feeling that this was the greatest town anywhere in the world, that there was no challenge we couldn't meet. We made the most profitable, most successful Olympics, even still to date. That the world was looking at us for answers, and that we looked to ourselves knowing that we could do it. That's the spirit that I want to bring back to Los Angeles. Because one person can only do so much. 40,000 city employees can make a dent. But 4 million people, and even 10 million in the region, if we inspire ourselves to work with our neighbors, are an unstoppable force. An unstoppable force to make sure that we're safer, to make sure that we're more prosperous, to make sure that we have the best quality of life anywhere, and that all is happening because we have the best run city in America. So I need your help. And my last pitch, because I can't come before you without asking you for something, is this summer I want to connect the young people of Los Angeles with their prosperity of the future. 10,000 young people last summer were turned away from city summer youth employment. In other words, they came, they wanted to work, they had enough initiative to come to the city and say, can I have a job for the summertime? And we had to say to 10,000 of them, sorry, we don't have any openings. Nothing to me was as emblematic of our failure of putting the pieces together. We have all the ingredients. It's not Detroit, it's not that there weren't jobs, it's not that there aren't great and generous people, it's not that we don't have many companies, but we needed somebody to begin to focus on that, so I did. And we've been working for many months, and this summer I want to provide 10,000 more summer youth jobs than we did last summer. So if you can take one, or two, or 5, or 10 young people this summer, let us know, because we need you. I want to make sure that those young people see the value of work, that they don't fall further behind in school in the summer, but they get further ahead. We're going to give them wraparound services that allow them to do a job interview for the first time, work on a resume, learn little digital badges where they can learn things like how to computer code or how to get vocational training. And if we get through this summer and do that every single year, 10,000 kids at a time, we're going to have a city that is poised for amazing growth, that's known as the center for opportunity again, that doesn't have to worry about its future, but that will be successful. So please let us know if you're interested in helping us. It's about $2,000 for the summer per kid. If you can't afford anything, we'll try to raise that money privately and just let us know about the opening. But if you can take a kid in and pay them for those 2 months, the value of work, the value of experience, we need your help with that too. So I really thank you for being the heart of the city. I thank you for struggling in a tough town to do business and continuing to do it, providing jobs. It's why we're here. At the end of our days, we're going to be left with 2 things. Who did we know in our time on this earth, and what did we do? And I know that all of you, knowing each other and living here in Los Angeles, we have extraordinary people that we will remember for our entire lives. But what we did, the jobs we created, the prosperity we were able to make, and the things that we left behind are ultimately what we remember in those last days. Let's make sure that those are great, and that we turn the city not just into a big city, but a great city once again. Thank you so much.